I'm Victoria Aurora Bennett Salvador, and I am the Student Union President over at Birmingham City University Students' Union. So we've brought in a report and support tool this year, which underpins all of our policies and is actually the front-facing tool that students and staff can use to ensure that they let us know over at the Student Union and also the university what the reality is of the situation for those who are experiencing harassment and other misconduct areas. We have been using the tool to not only gather data, understanding and narrative, but also to ensure that our students and staff are getting the support that they need the most relevant to the areas. We've worked with local charities to bring them on board so that students have a direct line to getting the support that they genuinely need and that they deserve. And the only other thing that I'd mention about this tool that has been absolutely spectacular is the reports that we get from it. And this is where I'm just going to talk a little bit about the narrative that we are able to achieve from this. We're able to see what specific type of harassment is happening, where it's happening, and who it's affecting the most. And what that does is that allows us over at the Student Union to deliver campaigns that can make real change and real difference. And it allows us to go above and beyond what we would usually be able to do, because we've got that data and that understanding, and we can have conversations with those students who reflect those numbers so that we know that there is a person behind that number. We've also done a lot of revisions of different policies this year, and that's to ensure that those that are relevant to the report and support tool do actually underpin the tool appropriately, as I mentioned, but also these policies need to be revisited consistently, and it's something that I implore a lot of universities and student unions to do, because sometimes policies can be very grey, and it's really important that ones, especially around things like harassment and sexual misconduct, they need to be very black and white. And then off the back of this as well, we are ensuring that we develop a really thought out, thorough student training program, specifically around the topic of harassment and sexual misconduct. And the reason for this is that we find that if we can have preventative measures in place, proactive conversations, it will mean that there are less instances for our students to not only experience harassment, but also to ensure that if they see something happening like that, they're able to call it exactly what it is. One of the primary ways that we have students involved is through our sabbatical officer representation. So our sabbatical officers are elected every single year, and what we do is we sit on groups like task and finish groups, action change groups, which means that we're able to voice how students are thinking and feeling based on not only the focus groups that we run, the surveys that we have, but also the reasons why we were elected into our positions. So for example, I've been re-elected on one of my campaigns, which is around safety on campus. The report and support tool fits perfectly within that, and I worked on it last year, and I continue to do it this year. And the reason that I continue to do that this year is because I've been elected by students for student voice. And these focus groups that we run, we tend to run them specifically to different areas, but we also have things like task and finish groups where we can actually invite some student leaders, so students who sit within societies, from Afro-Caribbean society to some of our protected societies like Women's Society, for example. They actually have people who are capable of coming along to those meetings and voicing the opinion that they represent. So there are a number of ways that they can form and amend the processes from a student perspective. So something that I've actually just previously mentioned is that we did an extensive student consultation for the report and support tool. And the reason we did this is because we wanted to ensure that the students who this was going to matter to the most had the biggest voice and the biggest say. So we put it forwards to not only the protected societies, but also to societies in general to get their full feedback on the tool, allowing them to interact with the tool during its forming stages, but also to look at things like language and ensuring that the language is reflective for each different community that would be using the tool to report or receive support on those particular areas. So I'd say one of the key ways that we promote this diverse student voice and speaking up about change is to ensure that they have a platform to do it. And one of the best and reoccurring platforms is social media. So the university and the student union join forces to start this campaign called Your Voice campaign, where students and staff can use the hashtag Your Voice and share their narrative and their feelings and emotions, not only around harassment, but around the report and support tool as a whole. And what this has done is it's allowed for a development of our understanding of the culture that we have around harassment and misconducts in general. But one of the ways that we want to move this campaign forward is to ensure that we have some of those really awesome student leaders and also staff leaders engaging in the conversation and the narrative and developing it beyond the sphere of social media and into team meetings and into spaces where you can have one-on-one conversations that develop your ability, knowledge and understanding around things like harassment. And actually, one of the key ways that we have within the student union to bring about conversation around issues facing specific student communities is through our representation system. So we have things called course reps and school reps. We also have student voice assistants that gather data through surveys so that we can get better understanding of how the services that we offer at student union impact on specific communities. But through this representation system and through the ideas board, we're able to really see and understand what our student communities are talking about. The ideas board, which I just mentioned, is a really brilliant way for individual students as well as groups of students to bring to the student union and to their sabbatical officers new campaign ideas, new projects that can really change the face of the student union in years to come, and can be implemented over a long period of time, which will give longevity to the changes that need to be made so that the issues being faced by those student communities are reduced twofold. And then the final way I'd say that we ensure that we promote diverse student voices is through our protected societies. I've mentioned this before about going to these meetings, but it's true. The protected societies have the ability to not only run campaigns, but also be voices for the students that they represent based on their protected characteristics. And it's super important for us that we have super engaged committees. We have things like presidents and inclusion officers, and what they do is ensure that we at the student union get to hear more from these protected characteristics that may actually, or protected societies, sorry, that may actually be able to bring a different perspective than the one that we initially would have taken, or the action that we would have necessarily taken. So what that does, or if you accumulate that all together, it allows for brilliant campaigns like Your Voice campaign to really grow and help us create a space where we can exceed the expectations of our students, and we can align ourselves with the true values that we have at BCU and the student union. So whilst we can have all of the systems and processes we want, I think there's one thing that really shines through, and that is something called authentic curiosity. So where a university actually showcases that they're listening and asking questions that genuinely stimulate a conversation piece around action rather than just conversation. And the systems and processes that we have in place at the moment allow for us to have some conversations where authentic curiosity can take place. But what we want to see more of is this genuine understanding that sometimes the data sets won't necessarily reflect the true narrative that we're seeing. And that's where narrative, just like the Your Voice campaign, really pulls in the elements of authentic curiosity that are currently being missed. And when we allow ourselves to listen, genuinely listen to students, you'll find more than just your perception of what they may be complaining about, because at the end of the day, they're not complaining. They're showing you their vulnerable side. They're showing you how they perceive the world, their experiences. And that's not an easy feat for anyone with any topic of conversation. So when we have students who are saying, this is my protected characteristic, this is what I've experienced in life, be authentically curious. Ask them how they've got to the space where they've got to, why they feel that a particular change needs to be made, how they feel that that change should be implemented. And actually, when we listen to that, there's so many solution sets just waiting for us to grab hold of and steer us in the right direction. So the one thing I would implore any university to do is to be authentically curious about your students' genuine experience at university, not the one that they first tell you, but the one that they tell you 3 meetings in, where they've let their guard down and choose to finally share how they genuinely perceive the world, how they genuinely perceive the higher education system and how it affects them. So be authentically curious, don't shy away from it. I'd say one of the things that I've touched on but not elaborated on is the underpinning values to the work that you're doing and the systems that you're changing. So when you're looking at your university and your student union and you're seeing how systems are working or not working, we want to have a look at your ethos and your values as well. And the reason for that is that no matter what system or process you put in place, it will be set to fail if your values, as in your staff team values, the people who are running that process and that system, do not align with the goal that you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to shift the culture and perspective of how we perceive harassment, it's really important that those who are dealing directly with the process are actually understanding and developing their understanding as they continue to go forwards, and they're consistently educating themselves, because more often than not, we get great processes and systems in place. And unfortunately, when we've done one set of training, we don't then continue to elaborate on the training. We don't elaborate on the education that needs to be there to underpin the true success of the tool or the process that you're using. So I think one thing would be, continue to assess and evaluate where your values and your ethos are as an organization, because that will be what keeps your process and your policies relevant and in place and reflective of what they need to be, rather than what you assume that they should be.